Okay, I'm very happy to be here. Indeed, 20 years after my first journey to China, 2004, to the conference that Ken organized in Beijing. And I submitted an abstract for this conference, and then 2 weeks ago, Clarissa told me, there's an extra keynote. And it was in a session with others, and she said, 10 to 15 minutes. And yesterday she was, she's now testing my improvisational skills. Because last night she was telling me, you actually have an hour. So yeah, so I'm not going to do an hour presentation, even though I was, this morning I got up at like 6:30 and I thought, okay, what do I do with this hour? And I thought, I could obviously go back to something I had, but I decided to only partially do this. And I thought we could spend part of the session going through some of Roy's terms for the future to see how they still hold. And that's what I'm going to do in the second part of this. But now I would like to just quickly say that just recently we gave Roy an additional award. It's not the first time he received, obviously. I just came back 2 weeks ago from the 60th anniversary meeting of the American Society for Cybernetics, of which I'm currently the vice president. And we gave Roy the 2024 Roy McCulloch Award. I was a nominator, but the American Society for Cybernetics does have an awards committee, so it was actually not me making that decision. But I would like to quickly read through the reasons for why we thought Roy would be a good awardee for this award. The Roy McCulloch Award of the American Society for Cybernetics is awarded to Roy Ascott for achieving significant impact in the community by applying cybernetics methods and principles in real-world applications. Roy Ascott has woven the threads of avant-garde practices and cybernetics since the late 1950s. Visionary pioneer and master of telematic and technoetic art, he fostered networks of cybernetic spirit. His art inspired many. Planting the seeds of substantial reform in art education, from the ground course to the Planetary Collegium and the studio at the Tau, Ascott initiated frameworks for learning that cultivated a new generation of artists and researchers exploring the unknown, where art, technology, and consciousness meet. With generosity and kindness, Ascott has pushed boundaries and set an example for what cybernetic transdisciplinarity could be. And I think this touches upon some of these ideas we just discussed in the previous session. It's about the unknown, actually, that is somewhere on the horizon. It's not, precisely not, a stereotype, a known that is of key interest. And that would be today's AI technology kind of always defaults on what is statistically probable. But that is not the horizon of technoetic art. It's always here. So myself being graduate of Roy Ascott's PhD program at the Planetary Collegium. These are some images. I was actually looking for some earlier ones because my own entrance into the Planetary Collegium was actually in 2003, but I couldn't find any photographs so quickly. So here, these are from 2010, and we have actually Laura. Maybe you know that photo. That is Trondheim 2010 with Pierluigi. And then we have here some images from Prague 2012. And I think I learned so much. And it's obviously the idea of a studio that was carried into a PhD program where you always had your peers to learn from. That was so important. And it's really became a kind of PhD level studio in a way, even though obviously we were discussing a lot of theoretical ideas, and you have to learn, and many of us had to learn to write academically because we have art and design backgrounds, and we were not really trained in this kind of arguing that is so important at the PhD level. But nevertheless, I think what really carried the Planetary Collegium was always the community. And each one of us learned so much from everyone else. And even though in some cases, the projects were obviously very different. And interests very different, even sometimes opposing interests or attitudes. But we would still be open to that discussion. That was what we were learning, to always be open to discuss these positions. So really quite a remarkable achievement. And I could see this now here as well. I've been here 3 times as a reviewer for the studio in Technoetic Arts. And I could see very similar spirit carried into this program, which was really lovely to see. And very rare, I would say, in China. Not because these batteries are over now, but rare in China because the focus is less on experimentation and exploration. It's, as Ken maybe said, maybe this works. Okay. Maybe my experience here as well is that, but that has nothing to do with the students or their ambitions in learning, but has to do with certain institutional settings that kind of discourages exploration, open-ended exploration. And experimentation, which is obviously always part of Roy Ascott's teaching. So this text, that was actually very similar topic I got. It was, for me, the basis in November last year. I gave a talk here and then explored this statement for an hour and a bit. I'm not going to do this today, but I still think it's really, for me, a quite interesting statement I'm going to read. The radical constructivism of post-biological philosophy, joined with the radical connectivism of Technoetic art, can provide a scenario of living in which we take on responsibility for the construction of our own identity and the reality it inhabits. As the world has seemingly entered a state of perpetual crisis against the unbearable absolute of stable ideals, we posit an ecology of change, present cybernetic agents on the anthropocosmic stage of becoming. Not solely concerned with biological life, technoetic thinking engages in conceiving inclusions in time and space. It emphasizes relations and is concerned with the survival of cultures, societies, communities, and places. Within the context of an ecology of change, art and design initiate performative processes that create borders rather than borderlines, limits rather than limitations, and constitute a discipline of critical creative practice that always seeks to extend itself towards an other, the unknown, addressing it without previously quantifying it to render it provable. That's my reflection on this. And I would like to spend the second part of this talk on the Technoetic city, but introduce it a little bit. The Technoetic city, having myself a background in architecture, this kind of collection of terms has always been quite fascinating. Roy gives a date below, it's from 1999, so it's also an anniversary in a way. It's like 25 years now. The 25th year of the Technoetic city A to Z. And we could spend some time to read through these terms, but for me, which is what we're going to do in the second part, what I'm going to do in the second part, then we see this whole. But the Technoetic city is also a planetary city, and these terms actually also link to the idea of a planetary collegium. And I was thinking about this term of the planetary in this connection as what is it actually that Roy wanted us to think about? Because it is, I think, I mean, you all know this image, the blue marble, which was the first photograph of the Earth, the first full photograph, or the first photograph of the entire Earth, let's say, from 1972, taken by the Apollo spacecraft. And it's this kind of image which has been it's one of the most published images that we have. But today, it's mostly presented in these kind of contexts where it presents a kind of digital connectedness. But that was obviously not what this image meant when it was first published. And but there has so for me the idea of the planetary in this context is an interesting concept to think about, because it becomes so obvious that Roy's planetary in this context refers to the old, an attitude towards this image that is from the beginning of the 70s rather than this very contemporary image. image and meaning. It is, so I'm going to read these ideas. This image of digital connectedness, or the image of the planet as symbol of or representation of global connectedness through technology and through a particular type of technology, mainly those technologies that are governed by the big tech industry. This image has received some recent critique by the community of geographers and posthumanists. The view of the Earth as globe, researchers such as Donna Haraway, Anna Tsing, and Kenneth Olvig have highlighted, is misleading. They conceptualize the view of the Earth as a globe as a means of detachment from lived experience and care, a detachment also of care for the Earth. And that's quite interesting in this context, because that is certainly not the idea of planetary, that is underlying the idea of a planetary collegium, or as I will in a couple of slides, these first reactions to this image in the early 70s. The image was extremely important. One could say that we entered a new era with this photograph. Before this, we did not have a photograph of the Earth as a full sphere, as globe. As the world maneuvered itself into one crisis after another, researchers with backgrounds mostly in geography began to suggest that this image might be part of the problem. With this image, which ranks highly among the photographs most often reproduced, they suggest a shift in point of view is initiated. We look at the Earth from space, and from the distance see a perfect sphere, the globe. The view from space is like the bird-eye view in design. One could also speak of a God's view. It is a view that is detached from the experience of everyday life. It assists rationalization, but also radical simplification, with the focus of research shifting to the analysis of movement. But here we have the position. Only in the last quarter of my life have we come to know what it means to be custodians of the future of the Earth, to know that unless we care, unless we check the rapacious exploitations of our Earth and protect it, we are endangering the future of our children and our children's children. We did not know this before, except in little pieces. People knew that they had to take care of their own, but it was not until we saw the picture of the Earth from the moon that we realized how small and how helpless this planet is, something that we must hold in our arms and care for. Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead, in 1977, that was, I think, the first or second birthday, an early one. Small and helpless, she says, how come? All the depictions of the globe rather suggest that Haraway and colleagues might be correct. In history, the globe was depicted with emperors who claimed power over the earth. In a scene that Charlie Chaplin masterfully conceived for the film The Great Dictator, Hinkle, the ruler of Tomania, is shown in his office of imperial grandeur, taking a blow off its stand, throwing it into the air. He catches it and tips it into the air again, as a gymnast does with the ball. As in rhythmic gymnastics, where more complex figures typically follow simpler ones, Hinkle presents more extravagant moves once he seemingly becomes at ease with the basic one. Chaplin's performance presents the audience with an ambiguous image of a globe ball that suggests graceful beauty and, at the same time, radical negligence and abuse. As it is planet Earth that figures as a ball, the grace we would associate with the gymnast's ball play flips into the negation of grace. As Chaplin shows, what looks like play is not necessarily play, as it incorporates direction and purpose towards an external goal, serving the dictator's ego and not the beauty of the performance. A gymnast engaging in a performance is always within a state of play, but the dictator's tipping and kicking of the gold ball into the air appears to be affected from without. So maybe this is the explanation for a shift in position that renders the image once as a symbol of our responsibility for taking care, and in the other case, once we are out, as something that serves direction, authoritarian action. And maybe thinking about that also explains or kind of pushes us back to Roy's teaching that is always considering this position from within, not necessarily without considering the position from without, but always keeping the position from within. It matters what ideas you use to think other ideas with. It seems like a very simple thing to say. It especially matters what ideas you use to think other ideas with if one of them is not in control of the other, if they reach into and interrupt each other, if the result of using ideas to do ideas with destabilizes both in ways that change the name of the game for the possibility of ongoingness, accountable to the power structures of the encounters and the entanglements. The picture of the blue marble was sent into the context of a series of journey and first-person narratives that are highly emotional, of astronauts leaving Earth and seeing Earth from space. It is quite clear that a shift took place. I would argue that with the loss of an emotional connection to the blue marble image, a change of position took place from within a system to a position outside a system, from agent participant to external or neutral observer. A gymnast engaging in a performance is always within the state of play, but the dictator's tipping and kicking of the blue ball into the air appears to be affected from without. The performance records a process of objectification that actualizes a detachment. The scene does reflect and question not only the hubris of Germany's Hitler, but also the practices that accompany the fascist rule. And this is one image that comes to mind in this context. There is another. Rhythmic gymnastics with or without apparatus was what countless girls in Nazi Germany engaged in as part of their training for good motherhood and service to the nation. There is no male version of rhythmic gymnastics. Chaplin's performance presenting a dictator's globe gymnastics integrates seemingly disparate and opposing notions and resists objectification. The characteristic of this principle of integration is referred to by Gregory Bateson as grace. Grace, not as a Christian, primarily Christian concept, but Bateson in this context refers specifically to Aldous Huxley's perennial philosophy. And in the perennial philosophy of Aldous Huxley, we find the word grace not only related to Christian cosmologies, but to Taoism and the concept of De, virtuosity and kindness included in the idea. So I'm linking it to the idea of grace. And this is perhaps, that is the ending of this part, perhaps what the Planetary Collegium has been, a school of grace. So if anyone is interested in the references to this part there, I would like to move on to the second part of this, since I was given improvisations of the Technoetic City. I would like to take this first part as a kind of initiation to rethink these terms of the Technoetic City A to Z. Do we still agree? Is there something to be added to these terms? For example, architect, the initiator of open-ended, evolutive systems and structures in interspace. And I would actually like to invite everyone to contribute if they want to try to navigate these technical things. Maybe I can open this. The view here to actually, so we see some of the people. The architect, Harrison. It's obviously not only an architect in the sense of someone who designs buildings, but it is the architect, everyone is, and everyone, because we are constructing as well. The quote by way of the beginning of this the slides, we are constructing our identity and in the worlds we live in. And we have to make decisions in relation to what are desirable worlds. That's what I would say. And we often forget, we actually often forget that it is us who have the agency to make these decisions. We are architects. We are not passengers in our lives, and we absolutely should take action to design the spaces we want to be. I think that is what that means here, and it's obviously a reminder that it should be open-ended. Open-ended in the sense of not only in the sense of a linearity towards the future, kind of as if it was on a timeline, but open-ended in the sense of being suggestive of possibilities, being suggestive of possible futures. And that is what the architect is. And as someone who creates these openings into the future that is will allow others to act in. So it's not someone who envisions the future as fixed, which would give every generation a kind of, okay, that's how it's going to be. No, it's someone who just opens the door to a possibility, to a possible future, which still allows later generations to design again, to act, to have agency. So it's never eliminating agency of someone else from the system. In interspace, right now we could think, what is interspace in this context? What do you think? Anyone? Interspace.
Yeah, when you're highlighting these two pillars, or two definitions, art making paper, and I'm considering how important the idea of self-organization is to Roy, and how close to ecology his thinking is, because he's not all the time mentioning, maybe not frequently using this word, ecology. But it's ecology. If you start with ecology, it's extremely connected to the idea of self-organizing systems in nature. It's beyond the land. And in a way that is really connected to ancient times cosmology, bringing this idea of ecology quite things to create understanding of perspectives, of cosmological perspectives from different levels. And when you're asking about the interspace, I believe it's just like exploding totally the idea of space as a container. Yeah. And it's the idea we're always in between.
Maybe also a shared space. The question of intersubjectivity maybe comes in here as well. So the question of where do we share and how do we share. So that's what I would see in this point as well. Maybe there are some, maybe I can open that chat. Any suggestions on anyway, I encourage you, you can just unmute yourself, and if you have anything to add. I have to pay attention with these windows because speaking of the same thing. Ken, you want to say something?
I remember Ken was talking about with SET, and then the conversation together with Eleanor was evolving to how do we make up the concept of technoetic or technoetic here, like in China, because the major here is in Chinese it's interactive arts, was never technoetic arts. So they were discussing the idea of technology as a container. As far as I can understand, you can correct me, and like if I misunderstood, was somehow related to an Eleanor as well, saying this is some sort of a vessel, yeah, technology as a vessel, or the tech as a vessel, or the mind in this case.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to hear you guys talking into the microphone and not Zoom.
So we need to speak to, yeah. Sorry.
But that's okay. That's okay. I get. So what I'm seeing here is sort of the symmetricality between behavior of forms and forms of behavior. I guess that goes back to my own talk. And in architecture,
Sorry.
like I was thinking architectonics. So like the meaning of the word architecture is so arca is like master, tectonics then of forms. So it's really referring like from the Greek word architectonics. Yeah, is the maker of forms. And forms, they have a process, right? And but starting in consciousness, like proto forms begin in like conceptual forms and then become manifest, right? So it's this process of experimentation with forms, manifesting them. Maybe sometimes they become failed experiments, and then so you have prototypes and different versions of stuff until forms take on something that can subsist. You know, they become part of culture, societies, and forms of thought or habits of thought, right? And even as we sort of move from the idea of world to planetary, that's kind of also where conceptual forms or format start to transform, because thinking in the like the sphere of world and in the terms and the ideas associated with world, the idea of planet takes you to another sort of sphere or another matrix of terminology of ways of thinking and stuff, because planetary refers to really a not the world. It's really referring to the solar system. That's the perspective, because now so if we're talking spheres like G and the biosphere, this is from the heliosphere or the solar system perspective, we see planets and the planetary. So just the form of ideas start to transform around that point. Ideas start to reform into different combinations and stuff. I mean, so we're thinking about architecture in terms of cities, but we're really thinking also in terms of architecture in terms of on the planetary scale. So architecting a planetary system. And this is where you get into maybe the new areas of like SpaceX, and systems of satellites orbiting the planet. And so start architecting the planet, right? And that's obviously going to take it's going to have a lot of influence on forms of thinking.
Yeah, these are all very good points. I agree. So it's actually not, maybe this wasn't so clear in my short excerpt. It's not only the position from within, but it has to do with this shift of position from within to without and back, and or a kind of flexibility with this kind of viewpoint that is, it seems to me very important.
Well, there's this give and take between inner and outer, right? So as the outer expands, the inner expands also. I think we have, yeah, many thousands of years of inner exploration. But as we start to think of the heliosphere more in a substantial kind of perspective, from an actual perspective, it's going to change the inner landscape also, right?
Yes.
Because when you're just thinking of villages and stuff and on that level, the inner, I think, is going to have a scope. Do we think of that, the scope of the inner, as being the same as like you were talking about cosmological perspectives? Were we there before? Before planetary perspectives? Was the inner landscape really as vast as cosmological thinking? Or is this a new perspective? Do we actually have more of an inner, a vast inner space comparatively?
So some of the reactions in the early 70s, especially of the astronauts flying to the moon and seeing the Earth for the first time, suggest precisely what you said, that suddenly there was an expansion of the inner sphere. And it's quite interesting. Very, very emotional reactions. So indeed, so it seems to suggest that there is always this mutuality, this shifting viewpoint to this outer, to the kind of outer system that at the same time the inner expands. Seems to be, at least there seems to be some evidence in these kind of records from the early 70s, and that is also where Margaret Mead's statement kind of falls in, which suddenly we gained a new perspective. I would like to, maybe because there are more keywords, maybe have a look at some of the others. Biohouse, body, connectivity. The Technoetic must combine the connectivism of cognitive science and the connectionism of cognitive science and the connectivism of the artists and the hands. It's an interesting differentiation between the idea of connectionism and the connectivism. Maybe someone would want to explore this. Any comments? That could be why. An ism, obviously. Both have the ism.
It looks like the body and the house
Yeah.
have this relation, right? So again, I'm thinking symmetrically here, like the biology of building and the building of biology. So I'm always thinking like symmetrically like that. So like as we build, as we architect, we're thinking of the body as, building, extending the body. So the biohouse is going to be this idea of organic structures. But that was, I was recently kind of taken by this idea of, we went from the machinic to the organic, in terms of Whiteheadian philosophy. And thinking of organism, but I've recently been thinking how organicism has almost become mechanic. It's just a more complex machine. And it just seems like whatever humans touch, it starts to become mechanical. So even organicism is somewhat tainted by this idea of mechanism now that we have, that we're starting to build out, such as a biohouse, right? We're starting to then think of the house as an organism, but it's still making it somewhat mechanical.
Yeah, we have a return to this in kind of biomimetic design in architecture, and I'm also not very convinced, because we don't seem to be, we seem to, in these kind of contexts, we often seem to convert nature into into what we can imagine, and these are mostly mechanical forms apparently, and processes. It's quite interesting. So maybe linking back to your talk, what struck me, Roger T. Ames, whom you probably know, he would differentiate between these kind of biology-based ideas that have been very dominant in the Western context, while in the Chinese context we have ideas of organization, but they are always society-based. So it's not a biology-based question of organization, which is quite interesting, because in that context, one could then say it actually allows for the body without organs. It actually allows for the expansion of ideas.
Going back to the
or you maybe you have to
just thinking about like body and biohouse, or in the house as an idea, and considering the planet or the solar system as a house, I believe it's our connection to the universe, to the stars and other planets. We decided to call planets, right? They have different names in different cultures. We're all connected to the stars in the way we navigate this landscape here. So from the Maya civilization to the Greeks and Romans to Chinese and the zodiac in China, the zodiac in Europe, the sun as a god, the moon as a goddess, or the moon as another god, and all those things. We had previous understandings that there is something outside of or far from the ground floor here that is influencing life on Earth. So before science, or before culture, like in the way you can write about it, in a more fluid way, not having everything codified, as Laura was saying, reducing everything to symbols in a more organized and pattern-based way. We thought of us here as connected to the outer space. I don't think we ever thought of us as like something like a worm, really connected to the soil and the earth and the forests, like as we are engaged in nature, as the green understanding of nature. But yeah, this more cosmological connection, I think it was always here. Or the sailors, they're using the stars, like we could move from wherever, South America to North America, like people just walking, or walking the Amazon forest and the Sahara Desert. they're just using the stars, and the stars they're external. Yeah, and we are aware of it. All those energies, like for pregnancy, the way the cycles of plants and the animals, we count the cow. When the cow is pregnant, it's like 9 moons, or I'm not sure if it's 9 moons, but like several moons, and the baby born, you know. So same for us, the girls, you know, it's mainly our cycles for reproduction. They are related to the moon, and we are aware of it for thousands of years. I believe it's not from the 60s and Cold War or post-war, Second World War times that we understand Earth as part of something that's huge that we call the universe, or this more organized, like Raman Greek planetary system. And you have the I Ching here, that's the divination connecting all those things from here to there. So yeah, I believe
That's a good point.
The house was always the cosmos.
So maybe when Laura was talking about these futurities, we can also think before. So it seems like when you think futurity, it helps also to think archaically, or how it was before the, you know, like the Enlightenment and even pre-Greek philosophy, to more ancient ways of thinking.
Yeah, I was just thinking, thanks for saying that Enlightenment came and kind of ruined it all, that there were these knowledges, but somehow the Enlightenment came and was very dominant. And I think from this also came this, we were just chatting here with Claudia, that this exclusion of humans from the nature, just when you were talking about the biohouse and this idea that there's always seems to be that there's a nature and then us. But I mean, we are part of it. We're one species. We have our traits, how we function. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. I just wanted to comment on the Enlightenment and this sort of a rationality.
I recently heard a talk by, what was Rupert Sheldrake or something, about the sun is conscious. Is the sun conscious? So you were thinking about, yeah, in ancient times, the sun was a god. But now, like at this next level of evolution or something, we can think about, is the sun conscious? And then it made me think of the possibility that it had a consciousness. So reframing consciousness in terms of planetary thinking, that the sun is conscious. It has.
Yeah, I think this is important, that we keep open these possibilities, really, and that is maybe what planetary thinking really means, to kind of keep open the possibilities for you know, discovering new ways of being.
Yeah, I'm thinking something, Claudia, as in your talk, you showed this image of the planet from the kind of moon and this. I wonder if that image with the kind of times of enlightenment has sort of made this idea that, you know, we can go to space, we can leave the planet. Now the planet is here and I can take it in my pocket, in a way that maybe that has been a wrong way to go. Maybe it should have been that, okay, we are terrestrial beings, we are here. I mean, you had the Margaret Mead here on the care issue. I don't know if it's only about care, but I'm just like trying to see a different trajectory and not this capitalistic idea of shooting to the space that we go there when the planet is gone, because I think at least I will not be on that bus, probably because I'm not included, basically.
So it's really about the context and how you place the image in a particular narrative, that it totally changes in meaning.
Mhm.
Just really quite interesting. So I have now shown only a very short excerpt, but I read a lot. So when I was researching for this article, I was reading through a lot of these kind of comments by astronauts and how they were perceiving the image, and some of the comments in also scientific journals and so on. And at the time, the reactions were primarily emotional. They were not about it was not about this kind of we have this achievement kind of celebration so much, but rather about this astonishing kind of a very astonishing new emotion in a way.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, I guess it was, and you know, it's astonishing to first time to see the planet from away from the planet. But what about now? I don't know if that. What I try to point out is that the question, if that if that sort of image affected a certain way of thinking for us, which maybe led, I don't know. It's complex, I think.
Yeah, we lost the context. We lost this narrative, the other narrative for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. This is maybe what I'm sort of wondering, that what happened, and we still have those narratives, like Clarissa said, but they are on the fringes.
Yeah, but I think the fact that they existed also means that we can bring them back, maybe.
Yeah. No, I was thinking about the image about the Earth, like from another side point of view. That is also creates this kind of imaginary of controlling, like that you can a certain controlled environment that you can manage, and like a scientific point of view that is like globe you can put on your hands or can play like an object, and how you're gonna use that as a humans and etc. So yeah, I don't know, maybe there's such much scientification of the enlightenment that is, well, now we can see what it has. We have the kind of dominance of this, but actually is up to do it.
Claudia was talking about the de of the Tao Te Ching, and that's how we always talk about the Tao, but not the de. And that's important because that's kind of like the responsibility part. It's like you see the dictator playing with the world, and it's frivolous, and we don't grasp its importance. We don't have that responsibility, is lacking. And like in this day and age, it's so ubiquitous that we don't have that responsibility, that level of understanding of what we really have here. And that would be the de part. And yeah, so we should have a little bit more of that kind of understanding of what we have.
We were Googling up while you had these images of the Chaplin movie. What year was it actually made? And it was not like after the Second World War.
No, at the end, just at the end of the Second World War. It was actually still going on.
It's quite astonishing, isn't it? That time it must have made a really an impact, I would think.
I wonder if people understood really what he is talking about.
Yeah,
Because he was doing it in an entertaining way, and like, And
Yeah,
I
yeah. Think
there
of
was-
bring humor into that
there's
too.
a subtext.
But you know, the images, again, I think this is so important to think what is the context of it. That's why I showed these images of the girls with this rhythmic gymnastics. These images were ubiquitous at the time, you know.
Yeah.
So people might have actually understood the kind of sarcastic, it's not, it's like this very, very fine humor to I
Not
mean,
American audiences, they wouldn't have understood.
yeah.
It depends on the community they get, right? Yeah.
But maybe it was maybe this film was primarily made for European audiences. I don't know, but yeah, it's quite interesting to see actually how images also change once you take other images into in its context into consideration. But the same is true for statements issued in verbal language. Just because with images, we seem to think that they stand on their own, but they have a context as well.
Context. And he was into more discussions related to our relation to technology as well.
I think you have to speak.
Yeah, saying that Chaplin was into the discussions related to humans and societies in relation to technology. So this performance is part of this interest and conversation. Yeah, the way the technology related way of thinking and like processing the resources in the planet and including the humans, they lead to the sort of dictatorial behavior, like we have dictators all over the place back in time between the First and Second World War. In South America and Europe and all over the place.
And they're back today.
Yeah, that's it. So I think we're back and go because we have another session at 4.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So we
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you for your participation. I have more terms here, but we end this now and we open the other Zoom.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
We'll leave this.
Are you recording? Okay, now you can stop recording. Yeah.